Greetings, greetings, greetings. It is so funny going live on my tablet because it is so dark. It's so much darker than the telephone or than the laptop. So it's always a bit of a shock how the lighting is different. It's what we're rolling with for today. So let me prop it up. I'm gonna get this thing popping as much as I possibly can with this horrible lighting. I wanted to address a topic. It's actually been on my mind for a couple of weeks, and I have been meditating on it and thinking about it and just taking the time to get myself completely clear on it before I came and presented it to you guys. But the topic that I want to speak on is the way that people who claim they practice African spirituality or even claim that they're in the priesthood of an African spiritual system have actually just wrapped God in Kente cloth. So when we talk about God, when you use that term God, you are already speaking in terms of the Abrahamic tradition. So you're already speaking from a perspective that carries all of the baggage and all of the dogma that is a part of the Abrahamic tradition. So I try as much as I possibly can, and I am very conscious and aware of trying not to even use that term God. Because when you use the term God, everybody already has specific connotations associated with it. That means specific images, specific ways of thinking, specific philosophies are already attached to that word. So when you use that word, you're already bringing with it everything that comes with the Abrahamic traditions. Now, when I say Abrahamic traditions, I am speaking of Christianity, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and any variants of those, because there's a lot of variants of those particular traditions. There's new style ways of doing them, there's new things that are being done with them, but if the foundation of your tradition is the Torah, the Bible, or the Quran, then you are practicing an Abrahamic tradition, and that is your right if that's what you want to do. However, when you begin to practice an African traditional religion, it is your responsibility to make sure that you're not bringing the philosophies of Abrahamic traditions into your understanding of African traditional philosophies. You have to make sure that you're not. And especially once you have been initiated into the priesthood, you are misleading people if you're leading them to believe that African spirituality is connected and remotely resembles Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. If you are leading people to believe that those things have very many similarities and that they resemble each other, then you're leading them wrong, and you yourself have been misinformed. So, what has led me down this path at this point in time is this constant reference to Oshun, my Orisha mother, and the Orisha for whom I am avatar and a votary and have been for the past 25 years. Oshun, people will constantly say, and these are people within the spiritual tradition, will constantly say that in the West, Oshun is depicted in a way that is over-sexualized. I have a problem with that. The reason that I have a problem with it is because your view of sexuality is coming from the Abrahamic tradition. Your view of sexuality is coming from a European, Eurocentric, patriarchal mindset, which has absolutely nothing to do with Oshun. So often we hear that the way that Oshun is depicted in the West is overly sexualized. We hear this because she is depicted without many clothes on. My question for that is she not wearing the amount of clothes that a woman would wear within a tropical rainforest environment? which is where the Anago people originated, in what would generally be called at this day and time a tropical rainforest. It is too hot in in Yoruba land, let's just call it that. In the places in West Africa where the Yoruba people originated, the Anago people originated, it is too hot to wear a whole bunch of clothing. So pre-colonial Anago people were not all covered up and dressed up. And to be completely honest with you, if you visit those places today, if you visit the places today that were previously Yoruba land, people are not dressed and covered to the degree that they are dressed and covered here in the West. That is such a ridiculous assumption. So let's pause and just briefly deal with that. Let's briefly deal with what is looked upon as proper dress for a woman in the modern world. Because what's considered proper dress for a woman in the modern world is based upon the Abrahamic traditions and European social norms. Okay, Abrahamic traditions arose out of a desert dwelling people. If you've ever visited a desert, as the area of California and the areas surrounding it are a very good example of this as far as the climate is concerned, but you would have to be in an actual desert with sand to understand why that within the Abrahamic tradition, part of the tradition is for people to be completely covered. Because when that fine sand is blowing around, it will bite you and it will get all into your garments and all into your hair if you are not completely covered. So in the Abrahamic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, it is a part of that tradition to cover. And they see that as holy and sacred because that is what they have had to do from the beginning of time of them being in that area. So it is holy and sacred for a desert dwelling, desert originating people. It is not holy and sacred in a tropical rainforest in Africa. So it is ignorant to expect that a deity that arose in the tropical rainforest of Africa is going to be covered like an Islamic, Christian, or Judaic woman. That is ignorant. Okay, that's number one. So let's push those Abrahamic views of what women should wear out of our minds because they have absolutely nothing to do with what a West African woman should be wearing. Okay, they have nothing to do with that. The religion is the deification of a people. The religion deifies a culture. So Abrahamic religions deify Middle Eastern culture, as they should. That is their right to do so. What is not their right is to push those views off on other people. What is not anyone else's right? If you choose to practice the Abrahamic religion, then please feel free to do so and find peace and goodness within it. But it's not your right to have your view of what women should dress like, which is based upon people who have dwelled in the desert for thousands of years, and then to think that every good woman dresses like a desert-dwelling Middle Eastern woman. That is an ignorant view. Okay, so let's start with that. Okay, now let's move on. The second thing that we place our views of normalcy of woman's dress upon is European society. Let us look upon Europe then. Europe is cold. Europe is very rarely warm. There are very few places within that particular area where it gets as hot as it does in West Africa. So Europe has a tradition of wearing many undergarments, as makes complete and total sense when you somewhere where it is very cold. As we all know, when winter comes to wherever it is that we live, we have been taught to layer our clothing. It is the European tradition to wear very heavy clothes, to wear many clothes, and to wear many undergarments underneath those clothes in order to stay warm. That makes sense when one is in a cold area such as Europe. It is well within the rights of European people and people who are practicing European culture to cover their bodies for warmth and to wear many undergarments, to layer and to stay warm. It is not your right as a European person or as someone who is practicing European traditions to look at people who are practicing another tradition and say that they have to dress like you when it has nothing to do with their culture and it has nothing to do with the area and the ecology in which their ancestors live. Okay, so we've gotten those two things out of the way. Your view of the modesty of a woman's dress is based upon Abrahamic traditions coming from desert dwelling people or European traditions coming from people who dwell in places with a cold climate. That is where they come from. They are not universally sanctioned. They are cultural perspectives. Let's move forward. Let's move on past that. Why is it that if you practice a traditional African religion, a West African religion, no less, that you are offended by the sight of a woman's naked body? What is offensive about that to you from a traditional African, West African religious perspective? How is that offensive to you? It is only Abrahamic traditions that teach that it is offensive to see the body of a woman uncovered. That is not taught, and it is not a part of the traditions that come out of West Africa. It would be ignorant for that to be part of the traditions that come out of West Africa. Why the hell would our ancestral mothers have been covering their bodies like that? Give me one reason that they would have done it. I just want one. You can give me half a reason. I'll settle for half a reason that they would have done it. No takers? Give me a quarter of a reason that in the goddammit hot as hell equatorial forests of West Africa that our ancestral mothers would have been walking around covered up. Yeah, you will not find any ancient carving to support a belief that ancient West African women were walking around in all of this covered garb. You won't find an ancient carving to support that. The most ancient depictions of Oshun, she has on nothing but beautiful beads. She is adorned. She has on beads and ide. She has beads on her neck. She has beads around her waist. She has beads around her wrists and her ankles. That's what Oshun is wearing. Is she overly sexualized? She is comfortable in the climate and the ecology that she rose up from. She is a West African deity. There is no reason for her to be dressed a Christian or a Jew. It is ignorant to assume that that is how she would dress, and I am irritated every time that I see it. Furthermore, how can the deity of female sexuality be overly sexualized? Part of the power of Oshun is the power of female sexuality. How can she be overly sexualized if that is part of her power? If you have a problem with seeing the sexuality of a Black woman depicted, then you need to cleanse your mind from the Abrahamic views of sexuality. You are the problem, not the depiction of Oshun. There are verses upon verses in the Odu that speak of Oshun's sexuality. There are verses upon verses that speak of the power of her vagina, that speak of the power of her clitoris. There are verses about this. There are verses upon verses that speak of the power of Yemanjah's vagina, that speak of the power of Oya's vagina. This is Odu. This is our holy scripture in this tradition. And yet, when you see a depiction of Oshun's naked body, or when you see a depiction of the Orisha, the feminine Orisha, depicted in a way that is sexualized, you are offended. You are offended because you think of female sexuality from an Abrahamic perspective. So you are incorrect. not the person that is showing them as sexual beings, because being a sexual being is part of their power. Please stop doing this. I cannot stand Black people who make it their life's mission to prove to white people and to prove to Christians and to prove to Abrahamic people, our tradition is just like yours. We're just like y'all. We're not. We're not just like y'all. The beauty of diversity is that everyone is different. Everyone's tradition is beautifully unique, and it comes and it brings its own thing into the world. It's not just like yours. We do not view women the way that they are viewed in the Abrahamic tradition. We are not offended by a woman's naked body. We are not offended by female sexuality. We do not see it as a threat. We do not see it as anything wrong. God damn it, it is what we all come from. So the hell could it be a threat? I understand that it is a threat in your tradition because you have a fictitious story about an apple and a snake. But it is not a threat in our tradition. So could we please quit pretending that it is? Could we please quit looking and saying, oh, this is just a new style way to depict Oshun. In olden times, we had her covered up like a good Muslim woman. Why? Why would she have been covered up like that? What sort of sense does that make? From a scholarly perspective, why? Why would she have been covered up? That doesn't make any sense. What you're saying doesn't make any sense. And your offense at her naked body, if you claim to be a practitioner of traditional religion, doesn't make any sense. Why are you offended? What Odu supports you being offended by the naked body of a woman? Where is there an Odu that says that women are supposed to be covered from head to foot? I want to see it. I want to read it. I want to have it chanted and recited to me. There's no Odu that says that. That is ignorant. That has absolutely nothing to do with West African culture. That is the Abrahamic tradition that you have allowed to infiltrate your mind, and you have not taken the time to clean it out of your mind. So now you are here sitting up in the priesthood spouting this same bullshit, this same rhetoric, this same damaging, destructive dogma that Christianity is spouting. You have not changed anything about your views of life. You have not begun to live your life from the perspective of your ancestors' experience. You have only taken God and wrapped God in Kente cloth. And you teaching them same destructive ass, patriarchal, anti-woman, misogynistic, anti-life, anti-child views that are found in the Abrahamic tradition. And you're trying to pass them off as African. They are not. There's nothing West African about that. When you're talking about the ancestral mothers, when Islam came into West Africa, came into Yoruba land, when Christianity came into Yoruba land, our ancestors were forced upon pain of death to convert to those religions. And as they converted to those religions, there were certain festivals that they stopped having. There were certain festivals that they stopped celebrating. And there was particular festivals that they refused to stop celebrating. Even if they were Christian, even if they were Muslim, they said certain festivals we have to continue to celebrate because they are too important. One of the festivals that they never stopped celebrating was the Gela Day Festival. The Gela Day Festival is the celebration of the ancestral mothers, the celebration of the Iyami, the celebration of the Aje, so-called witches. From a West African perspective, they said it would be too dangerous for us to stop celebrating this and to stop having this festival. So when you're having a discussion about the importance of the ancestral mothers within the tradition of the Anago people, you will have people who will try to convince you that the ancestral mothers are not the foundation of the tradition, because they're trying so hard to make the tradition like the Abrahamic religions that they are supposed to have left. You are doing a disservice to the Orisha. You are doing a disservice to your own ancestors. And you are misleading people when you are making them believe that our tradition is similar to and bears much resemblance to Christianity and Islam. It does not. It originated, it rose up in a completely different ecology and within a completely different culture. If you are looking and seeing many similarities, then you are misinformed and you need to study. You need to dig deeper. It should not be looking like Christianity. You should not be looking at it and saying, that's just like what we learned in church. If you're doing that, then you're being taught improperly. You should be like, wow, I had never considered that concept. Oh my goodness, I had never thought that the universe could be looked at like that. It should be completely new and different from what you were used to and what you had been taught. That's what you should be feeling. Your mind should be getting blown. It should not be the same. And if anyone is teaching you that it's the same, they're teaching you wrong. Go outside of that and do your own research and you will see what I mean. If you are offended by the sexuality of any of the feminine orisha, check yourself. That is coming from an Abrahamic perspective. Check yourself. If you are offended by the nudity with which the feminine orisha and the masculine orisha, because nobody ever depicts Shango Kawoka with fully clothed in a suit. Shango Kabiesi don't be in no suit when we see a depiction of him. Baba Ogun don't have on a big old black coat. Right? They don't depict the male orisha clothed either. But we only get a complaint about the female orisha being depicted without clothes on because the Abrahamic tradition has instructed you to fear feminine sexuality. And so you are now infusing that view into your interpretation of the tradition of your ancestors. And it is completely and totally incorrect. I want to understand why it is offensive for an ancient pre-colonial Yoruba woman to be depicted as naked. I want to understand. I don't want any Abrahamic reasons. I want a reason coming from Anago culture, pre-colonial Anago culture, as to why that a feminine deity would not be depicted as naked. Particularly a feminine deity who is at the root of the fertility of the community and whose sexuality is known to be one of the driving forces and creative forces of the community. Why would she not be depicted as a sexual being? You are ignorant. You sound ignorant. What you are saying doesn't make any sense. It only makes sense within the context of a European and Abrahamic view of life. That's the only place that it makes sense. Outside of that context, what you're saying doesn't even make any sense. The modesty of a woman. First of all, why is it important for a woman to be modest? Why is that important from a non-Abrahamic perspective? Why are women supposed to be modest? That's the first question that you need to ask yourself. But modesty and proper dress vary based on culture. There is no one form of proper dress that is acceptable universally. There is no such thing as a universal culture. That is a lie that is fed to you by white people because they love to pretend that their culture is universal. But there's no such thing as a universal culture. Each group of people experience life differently. And their culture is based upon how they experience life. There is no universal culture. So how is it wrong for a woman to be depicted as nude and to usually be depicted as nude? I need to understand from an Anago cultural perspective how that's wrong and why that's offensive and why we should not be looking upon the breasts and buttocks of a depiction of the goddess of fertility, love, and sexuality, or Shun. Why is that wrong for us to look at it? Why do we have a problem with it? What should she be wearing? And why? Pre-colonially, why? When we look at the traditional dress of a Yoruba woman, we have two pieces of clothing that one always has if you're not going to a formal event. If you're going to a formal event, those two pieces may become 4 or 5. But it's two pieces of clothing that are just casually worn. They are called iro and buba. If you are listening and if you're aware of West African tradition, then you should hear right off the bat that the term buba has an Islamic root, because bubas are worn all over Islamic countries. So if you think about Yoruba woman's traditional attire, the only part of that attire that is actually traditional is the iro. The iro is what we now call of the term wrapper. It is a piece of cloth that is wrapped around the bottom of your body, and it may be wrapped around at the top up here, but in general, it's wrapped around the bottom of your body. And what you are covering with your iro, whether you are male or female, is your regenerative organs. Because once you became sexually mature, then you were expected to cover your regenerative organs. Your regenerative organs, for those who do not understand, would be your penis and your testicles, or your vulva if you were a woman. So that's what you're covering with your iro. Nothing else was expected to be covered, and within some festivals and within particular contexts, even that was not covered. There were particular contexts in which it was proper for your regenerative organs to be seen, because they were a part of the ritual that was taking place. Not to say that the ritual was a sexual ritual, but the seeing and the imagery of those regenerative organs was part of the ritual. So, if the traditional wear of a Yoruba woman is an iro and the rest of her body is bare, and that's her traditional pre-colonial clothing, because buba being an Islamic word, then we know that a buba was brought in after the coming of Islam. So prior to that, it was just iro. And in most West African cultures, this is the case. Furthermore, the last time that I was in Nigeria, which was 18 years ago, I will admit, I was there in the year 2000, women were wearing their iro. Sometimes you would see them with their iro covering their breasts. Sometimes you would not. Sometimes you would just see their breasts. This is in the year 2000. And when the iro began to slip down, because the iro doesn't have a button or a tie or nothing like that, you just tuck it. You just tuck it. And when the iro began to slip down, the woman would stop what she was doing and open it up and retie it and fix it and retuck it. When at the point that she opened it, her entire body was exposed. Nobody said anything. Nobody thought anything. Nobody was standing there talking about, oh, I'm seeing her whole body. So if this was the norm in Nigeria in the year 2000, it's ignorant to believe that millennia ago, when Oshun first burst out of the river, the Oshun River, that she came out fully clothed. That's an ignorant assumption to me. And so that anyone who is depicting her should draw her with all these clothes on, that doesn't make any sense to me. That is ignorant. It has no basis in the culture that Oshun comes from. It has no, but what are you basing this on? You're basing your thoughts of what is proper on European culture. And how that makes me feel, like I said before, is that you're trying to impress Europeans with your similarity to them. We the same as you. Or that you're trying to impress people who practice Abrahamic traditions with your similarity to them. For what? I ain't got shit to prove to them. I'm not like you. We don't see the universe the way that you see it. We don't see women the way that you see them. We do hold women's power in the highest of esteem and understand it to be the house of power. That's how we look at women. We are not offended by the sight of women's breasts. We are not offended by the sight of people's regenerative organs when that's proper to see. That doesn't throw us all off into some kind of tizzy. We are not overly sexualized. We are properly sexualized. It's so confusing to me, and it's so irritating to me, and it is an affrontery to our culture. I do not have to prove my culture's proximity to European culture or to Abrahamic culture in order to validate it. I don't have to do that, and I never will do it. Yes, come in. Yes, baby. What do you need? All right, it's fine. And if your basis for what is proper is what is European or what is Abrahamic, then cease in referring to yourself as a priest or priestess or a teacher of traditional African philosophy. Call it what it is. You have wrapped God in kente cloth and painted his face black, but you're going to keep all the same principles, all the same dogma, and all the same ideals that are there in that Bible, in that Quran, and in that Torah. You're going to keep all of those principles and dogma, and you just going to call it and pretend that it's some African. Say it's what it is. Don't say you're doing this over here, because that's not what you're doing. You're not even bothering to study and find out what the cultural norms are. You are assuming that European cultural norms and Abrahamic philosophical beliefs are universal. They are not. European cultural norms are based upon European ecology and European culture. Abrahamic cultural norms are based upon Middle Eastern ecology and Middle Eastern culture. As well they should be. There's nothing wrong with them being based on that. But that has no bearing and should not infringe upon my culture and how my ancestors viewed the universe and humanity and women and sexuality. So, okay, that's my literal rant. I have been holding that for 2 weeks. And so now I have finally discharged it and gotten it out and put it out there into the universe. Please share liberally. Ecstasy, abundance, and bliss. The warmth and the illumination of the light, and the mystery and the rejuvenative power of the triple black womb darkness upon each and every one within the sound of my voice who is wishing the same for me and mine. And as always, we wish the lessons of life upon those who are ignorant enough to wish us otherwise. Peace, y'all. I will see y'all the next time something wells up within me and I have to get it out. And you guys enjoy the rest of your week.